Winter doesn't just make the nights longer, it makes the world quieter. And in that silence, you start hearing things you were never meant to hear. That night, our backyard didn't feel like a backyard anymore. It felt like the ground had opened its mouth and was waiting for one of us to fall in. This happened a couple years ago, back before we moved into our current house. It was winter, real winter, the kind where the air feels sharp, the snow squeaks under your boots, and the sun gives up early like it doesn't even want to be outside. I remember how fast it got dark. By late afternoon, the sky already looked bruised. Purple and gray, heavy and low. That house sat on the edge of a wooded area. Not deep forest, but enough trees that the backyard felt like it had a wall of darkness behind it. In the summer it was normal, just trees, birds, the usual. But in the winter, the woods looked different. The bare branches made everything feel exposed, like the trees were skeletal fingers reaching toward the house. The snow on the ground reflected what little light there was, which should have made things less scary. But somehow it made it worse. It made the shadows look sharper. It was me, my youngest brother, and our dog. My brother's name was Vivy. He was about 12 at the time. And our dog was Frisbee, a golden retriever mix we'd had for around 3 years. Frisbee was the kind of dog who hated the cold. She loved being warm, curled up on blankets, stealing spots on the couch. The type of dog that would sprint outside, do her business as fast as possible, and come scratching at the door within 5 minutes like, "Okay, I did it. Let me back in. I'm done." That day was brutally cold, windy, bitter, the kind of cold that makes your nose sting the second you breathe. We didn't want to go outside. Not even a little. But Frisbee needed to go. So we let her out. She bounded into the yard, paws crunching into the snow, tail wagging like she didn't understand the concept of freezing. The back porch light cast a weak yellow circle on the snow, and then the rest of the yard was just darkness. Vivy and I went back inside. We were in the living room, messing around, probably watching TV or arguing about something stupid. I don't remember exactly. I just remember time passing. 5 minutes, then 10, then longer, and no scratching at the door. I glanced at the clock and frowned. "Is Frisbee still out there?" I asked. Vivy shrugged, already half distracted by whatever he was doing. But I could tell he felt it too, that subtle off feeling. Frisbee never stayed outside this long in winter. Another minute passed. Nothing. The house was quiet except for the TV and the wind smacking the windows. That wind sounded mean, like it was trying to get inside. Finally, Vivy stood up. "I'll check," he said, like it was no big deal. I should have gone with him. I should have just put on my boots and jacket and stepped outside too. But I didn't, because I didn't think anything truly bad could happen in our own backyard. That's the lie you tell yourself until it isn't true anymore. Vivy pulled on his coat, opened the back door, and stepped out into the cold. The door shut, and the house swallowed him. A minute passed, then another. I didn't hear him call for Frisbee from inside, but that's not unusual. Our dad was home watching TV with headphones on. He wouldn't hear us anyway. A few more minutes. I started getting irritated, mostly because I didn't want our mom to come home later and find out we'd let Frisbee stay outside too long. Then the first thing I noticed was silence. Not normal silence. The kind of silence where you suddenly become aware that you haven't heard Frisbee bark once. And then I heard something. Faint. Muffled. Barking. But it didn't sound like it was coming from the porch. It sounded far away. Like it was coming from someplace it shouldn't be able to come from in our backyard. I stood up, my stomach tightening for no reason I could explain. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. All I could see was snow and darkness and trees. Then I saw Frisbee barely, a shape moving across the yard. But she wasn't running toward the door like she always did. She was running deeper, toward the middle of the yard, toward the edge where the woods started. I didn't see Vivy anywhere. That's when real panic started crawling up my spine. I threw on my own jacket and boots so fast my hands fumbled the zipper. I didn't even put on a proper hat. Just grabbed something and shoved it onto my head. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap. The wind was vicious, cutting through my clothes immediately. The porch light behind me made the snow in front of the door glow, but beyond that, it was dim and gray, that early winter dusk where everything feels half visible. "Vivy!" I shouted. My voice sounded small in that open space. I heard Frisbee barking again, still muffled, still wrong. And then I heard Vivy's voice, not near the porch, from somewhere ahead. "Over here!" he yelled, strained. "But be careful. Don't get too close." That sentence alone should tell you how bad it was. Kids don't say "be careful" like that unless something is seriously wrong. I moved forward slowly, placing my boots carefully because the snow was hiding patches of ice. Frisbee ran toward me, finally. For a split second I felt relief. Then she did something she'd never done before. She turned around and ran back. And she looked over her shoulder at me like she was begging me to follow. My heart started pounding. I kept moving. "Vivy!" I called again, louder. "Where are you?" "I'm right here," he yelled back. "Just don't get close to the edge." The edge of what? The yard? The woods? I didn't understand until I got close enough to see. I stepped forward and the snow under my boot made a strange sound. A hollow crunch instead of the normal solid crunch. I froze. I leaned forward carefully, and I saw it. A hole. A deep, vertical pit like the earth had been punched in. It was at least 6 or 7 feet deep. Maybe more. The walls were frozen dirt and snow, almost smooth, like something had carved it out. And at the bottom was my brother, standing there, looking up at me, his face pale and tight with fear, his breath puffing in rapid clouds. For a second my brain refused it, because that hole didn't belong there. We'd lived in that house for years. We'd played in that yard every season. We knew every bump, every dip, every spot where the grass grew weird. There was never a hole. Never. And yet here it was, big enough to swallow a person. I felt nauseous, like reality itself had shifted. "How did you even get in there?" I demanded, trying to sound angry so I wouldn't sound scared. Vivy looked furious and embarrassed at the same time. "I was trying to grab Frisbee," he said, teeth chattering. "She was down here first. I slipped." I looked down and saw Frisbee sitting a few feet back from the edge, whining, ears low, tail tucked. She kept inching forward like she wanted to jump into him. "Frisbee, stay," I snapped. She stopped, but her whining got louder. I knelt down cautiously, keeping my weight low. "Okay," I said. "I'm gonna pull you up." Vivy reached his hands up. Our fingers barely touched. I grabbed his wrists and pulled. For a split second, he rose an inch. Then my boots slid. The snow at the edge was slick like glass. My stomach dropped as my body lurched forward. I had to let go or I would have fallen in two. I scrambled backward, heart hammering. Vivy's eyes widened. "Careful!" he shouted. Like he already knew what almost happened. I sat back on my heels, breathing hard. I couldn't get a grip at the edge. It was too unstable. And the more I stared into that hole, the more it felt like it was staring back. I know that sounds insane, but that's what it felt like. Like the darkness in that pit was thicker than the darkness everywhere else. Like it wanted another person. "Hold on," I said, voice tight. "Don't move. I'm gonna get something." Vivy looked panicked. "Don't leave," he said. I hated how helpless he sounded. "I'm not leaving," I said quickly. "I'm just grabbing something from the garage. I'll be right back." I ran. And it wasn't just because I needed tools. It was because I couldn't stand being near that hole. The garage felt warmer even though it wasn't. I grabbed the first thing I could think of, our old plastic kids' shovels. The cheap, colorful ones we used to play with at the beach. They were light, not ideal, but it was something. I sprinted back, dropped to my knees again, careful this time. I tossed one shovel down. Vivy caught it awkwardly. "Okay," I said. "Dig footholds. Make steps in the wall." He started carving into the packed snow and dirt. He grunted with effort, scraping out little notches. But when he tried to climb, his boots slid. He fell back down. Again. And again. Each time he slipped, snow crumbled away like the wall was melting under him. Frisbee started whining louder, pacing at the edge. "Frisbee, get back," I barked. She listened for a second, then crept forward again. It was like she didn't understand that the ground could open and eat her. And I didn't like how close she was getting. Vivy tried again. His fingers dug into the wall, nails scraping dirt. He got halfway, then slipped again, landing hard. He cried out. The sound shot through me like a knife. That's when I realized the cold wasn't the biggest danger. The hole was, because what if he couldn't get out? What if the walls collapsed? What if the ground gave way under me too? Then our dad would come outside to find, what? Nothing. Just two kids and a dog vanished into a pit that shouldn't exist. My hands started shaking. I looked around the yard, at the trees, at the snow, at the dim light. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the world was pretending nothing was wrong. "Okay," I said, swallowing. "New plan." I grabbed the shovel blade with both hands. "Hold the handle," I told Vivy. "Tight." He grabbed it. I pulled. Plastic flexed, bending slightly, and for a second I thought it would snap. But it held. I leaned back, using my body weight, boots digging into the snow for traction. Vivy's boots scraped against the wall as he climbed. He slipped once, but he held on. I pulled harder, my arms burning. His fingers reached the edge. I grabbed his wrists, and with one final heave, I yanked him out. He collapsed onto the snow, gasping, shaking violently. Frisbee ran to him instantly, licking his face, whining like she was apologizing. I didn't give us time to breathe. "Inside," I said. "Now." We grabbed Frisbee and stumbled back toward the house, half running, slipping on ice, adrenaline still roaring. We slammed the door shut behind us like we could lock the nightmare outside. Vivy was shivering so hard his teeth clacked. I made hot chocolate, wrapped him in blankets, gave Frisbee warm water and extra food. We didn't tell our dad. We didn't tell our mom. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you say, "Hey"? The backyard opened up and tried to swallow us. No one would believe it. But we believed it. Because we were there. For the next hour, Vivy sat wrapped up, shaking, staring at nothing. Frisbee stayed pressed against him, unusually quiet. And I couldn't stop replaying the moment I almost slid in. The sound the snow made, that hollow crunch, like stepping on a lid, like the ground was thin. Later, when the shaking stopped and the sun fully disappeared, I went to the back window. I stared out at the yard, at the exact spot. But in the darkness, all I could see was snow, and my own reflection. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I opened the door and stepped out, I would find that hole waiting again. Spring came, the snow melted, the grass returned, and we finally worked up the nerve to go look. We walked to the spot. We searched the yard. We measured from the fence. We poked the ground with sticks. Nothing. No hole. No dip. No disturbed earth. It was like it never happened. The next winter, we went back with those same plastic shovels, thinking maybe we remembered wrong. We didn't. We knew exactly where it was. But again, nothing. No pit. No sign. Just solid frozen ground. That's the part that still makes my skin crawl. Because if it had been a real sinkhole, there would have been some trace. Some scar in the yard. Something. But it vanished. Like it was never real. Or worse, like it was real. For only as long as it needed to be. We never told our parents. We never told friends. Because even now, years later, I can't explain it. All I know is this. Every winter, when snow covers the yard, I'm careful where I step. Because sometimes winter doesn't just hide the grass. Sometimes it hides the ground itself. And sometimes it opens. I went into those woods to practice a school monologue. I came out running for my life. And the worst part isn't that someone followed me. It's that my dog, who had never barked once in his entire life, started barking like he'd seen something that wasn't human. This happened in 2020, during a cold Canadian winter. One of those winters where the air feels like it has teeth. The kind where your eyelashes stick together if you blink too slow and your skin starts burning the second you step outside. I was 14, and because of lockdown, everything in life felt warped. School wasn't really school. Home wasn't really home. Days blended together and time didn't move normally. We had this hybrid schedule. One day in school, one day online. And on the online days, my house felt crowded even if nobody was talking. Everyone was always around. You could never be truly alone. That afternoon, I finished an online class and remembered I had to rehearse for theater. I had this monologue, dramatic, emotional, loud, crying scenes, angry lines, the type of performance where you have to fully commit or it looks fake. But the walls in our house weren't thick and my family was home. I remember sitting on my bed, script in hand, trying to imagine doing it in the living room while my parents were watching TV, or while my sister was nearby. The thought made my face burn with embarrassment. I didn't want anyone listening. Not because they judge me, well, maybe a little, but because acting like someone else in your own home feels exposed. Like you're letting people see a side of you that isn't meant for them. So I decided to do the only thing that seemed reasonable at 14. I was going to practice in the woods behind our house. We lived in a very isolated area. Trees everywhere. Our property backed up to private land. No hiking trails. No neighbors wandering through. Usually it was quiet back there. Peaceful. I convinced myself it was safe because nobody ever came into those woods. That was my first mistake. Before I left, I asked my sister if she wanted to come. She said yes at first, grabbed her jacket, and followed me to the back door. But the moment we stepped outside, everything changed. The cold hit us like a wall. The snow on the ground glittered faintly, and the sky looked dull and pale, like it had been drained of color. The treeline sat ahead of us, dark and thick, like a curtain. My sister stopped walking. Just stopped. She stared at the woods, and her expression shifted. I remember saying, "What's wrong?" She didn't answer right away. She just kept staring, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she shook her head. "I don't want to go," she said. "What? Why?" "I have a weird feeling," she muttered. I laughed a little, trying to tease her. "It's just trees." But she wasn't smiling. She looked genuinely unsettled. "No," she said again, firmer this time. "I'm not going." Then she turned around and ran back inside. Not walked, not casually stepped away. Ran. The back door slammed behind her. For a second, I stood there in the snow, confused and annoyed. My sister wasn't the type to scare easily. She watched horror movies like they were comedy. She'd wander around our property at night without caring. So seeing her react like that made my stomach tighten. But I pushed it down. I told myself she was being dramatic. I told myself she was just cold. I told myself I was being stupid for even thinking it meant anything. Then I grabbed my dog. He was a pug, about 3 years old, and the weird thing about him was that he couldn't bark. I don't know if it was medical or just how he was born, but in 3 years, I'd never heard him make a real bark. He'd snort. He'd whine. He'd do those little pug noises, but no bark. Also, he was the friendliest dog in the world. Social. Gentle. The type that would happily walk up to strangers like they were best friends. I clipped his leash on, took a deep breath, and started walking toward the treeline alone. The moment I stepped onto the dirt path, the world felt different. Snow muffles sound. It makes everything quieter. The crunch under my boots was the loudest thing, and it echoed weirdly between the trees. I knew those woods like the back of my hand. Or at least, I thought I did. I walked deeper, my pug waddling beside me, and I pulled out my phone. I hit record. I started doing my monologue. First, it felt stupid. I kept stumbling over lines. My voice sounded too quiet. I tried again, louder. More emotion. I started getting into it. I cried on purpose for the scene, forcing my face into the expression, letting my voice crack like I'd practiced in class. I got so into it that for a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I glanced down at my phone screen, and my entire body went cold. In the frame behind me, there was someone standing on the path. I froze so hard it felt like my bones locked. The camera was still recording. My monologue cut off mid-sentence. I stared at the screen, my eyes wide, my breath catching. Then I spun around. They were closer than they should have been. I genuinely couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Their body was wrapped head to toe in filthy, layered blankets and multiple dirty coats like someone had piled them on. The fabric looked wet and stiff from snow and grime. They were holding a massive black garbage bag, one of those thick industrial ones like restaurants use, the kind that can carry a lot of weight. In their other hand, they gripped something metallic, something sharp. I couldn't see it clearly, but I saw the way it caught light, a glint that made my skin crawl. And their eyes were staring at me through a gap in the blankets. Just eyes. No face, no expression, only eyes. I remember thinking, no one is supposed to be back here. No one ever comes here. So why was someone standing behind me, perfectly silent, in the middle of a brutal -34°C winter day? My first instinct was to leave casually, to not show fear, to act like I didn't notice. So I started walking faster, tugging my pug's leash. But my dog didn't move. He froze, like someone hit pause. The leash tightened. I tugged again. He wouldn't budge. He stood rigid, staring at the stranger. And then something happened that I still can't fully process. My dog started barking. A real bark. Not a snort. Not a whine. Barking, loud and sharp, echoing through the trees like an alarm. I swear my heart skipped, because a part of me felt this insane surge of relief. He was barking. He was finally barking. But that relief died instantly, replaced by terror, because I realized he wasn't barking because he learned how. He was barking because he was scared, truly scared. The stranger didn't flinch. They laughed, a low, dry laugh. Then they spoke. "Sorry, girl," they said. "But sadly, I'm not scared of dogs." The way they said it didn't feel like a joke. Felt like a warning, like they were telling me my dog wouldn't save me. My blood turned to ice. I didn't say anything. I just started walking faster. "Come on," I whispered to my pug, tugging gently. He finally started moving, but he kept turning his head back, eyes locked on the stranger, barking and barking like he was begging me to run. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, footsteps behind us. The stranger was walking now, not casually, faster, deliberately following. That's when my brain finally accepted what my body already knew. This wasn't random. This person wasn't lost. They were coming after me. Adrenaline slammed into my chest. I scooped my pug up into my arms, clutching him against me, and I ran. The snow was deep and uneven. My boots sank with every step. Branches whipped my face. The cold air burned my lungs. Behind me, the footsteps got faster. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I could hear them gaining. And then the path ended. A dead end. Not like a normal dead end where you can turn around. A dead end because the ground dropped off. A cliff. A steep drop covered in snow. I skidded to a stop, heart hammering so hard I could hear it. I turned my head. The footsteps were closer. Too close. I didn't see the stranger yet, but I could hear them breathing through the cold air, that crunching sound getting louder and louder. I had two choices: turn around and run past them, or jump. I didn't think. I just jumped. I clutched my pug tighter and launched myself off the edge. The fall wasn't huge, but it was enough to knock the wind out of me. I hit the ground hard and instantly sank into the snow. The snow swallowed me like quicksand, 3 feet deep at least. My legs disappeared. My arms struggled. My jeans soaked through immediately. The cold was instant and brutal. Within seconds, the wet fabric started turning stiff. Ice forming. My fingers went numb around my dog's body, but I forced myself to hold on. Then I felt movement. My pug, still in my arms, wiggled free and started digging. Frantic, desperate digging. His paws through snow everywhere. He was clearing space around my face, around my chest, like he knew I couldn't breathe if I stayed buried. I managed to pull myself up, gasping. My whole body shook violently from cold and fear. I grabbed him again and stumbled forward through the snow. My legs felt like they were made of glass. Every step hurt. I glanced back. and I saw the stranger. They stood at the edge of the cliff, one hand shielding their eyes like a visor, scanning the drop, searching for me. Then our eyes met. Even from that distance, I felt it. That direct connection. Like they'd found me. The stranger started moving toward the edge. Like they were about to climb down. Or jump down too. I turned and ran again. I ran through deep snow, my lungs burning, my arms aching from carrying my dog, my jeans freezing into stiff armor around my legs. I followed what I knew would lead back toward my house. But in that moment, the woods didn't feel familiar. Felt like a maze. Felt like everything was tilted slightly wrong. Like I'd stepped into a version of the forest that didn't belong to me. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably minutes, I burst out of the trees and into the open. The street. My house was visible. Warm light in windows. Reality. I sprinted up the driveway and slammed the door behind me. Inside, the warmth hit my frozen skin like needles. I stood there shaking, clutching my pug, listening. Listening for footsteps outside. Listening for the crunch of snow. Nothing. My family was inside living normal life. TV. Talking. Heat. They didn't know I'd almost been hunted in our own woods. And the strangest part? I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe shock. Maybe fear of being called dramatic. Maybe some instinct telling me that saying it out loud would make it more real. For days after, I kept looking out at the tree-line, expecting to see that layered shape standing there, watching. I never did. My dog went back to normal. Silent. Friendly. No barking. Not once. Like that day never happened. But I'll never forget it. Because I know what I saw. And I know what I heard. And I know my dog. My quiet, harmless dog. Somehow knew to warn me when it mattered most. Sometimes I tell myself it was just a homeless person looking for shelter. Sometimes I try to make it make sense. But then I remember the way they laughed. The way they said they weren't scared of dogs. The way they followed me faster and faster. And I remember the dead end. The cliff. And I realize that wasn't someone looking for shelter. That was someone who wanted to make sure I didn't make it back. Some roads should never be driven at night. Some woods should never be watched after midnight. And some places watch you back. This happened inside a place people call the Bridgewater Triangle. And once you hear this story, you'll understand why locals avoid it after dark. People love to laugh about the Bridgewater Triangle. They say it's just another urban legend. A spooky name to attract tourists. Ghost stories for bored New Englanders. But I grew up near it. And I promise you, that place is not normal. The scariest thing that ever happened to me there was in the late 80s on a foggy winter night. I was driving home from my warehouse job. Third shift. It was around 3 a.m. That hour when the world feels abandoned. No cars. No people. Just empty roads and your own thoughts. I was cutting through Route 44, right by the Hackamock Swamp. The fog was thick, hanging low over the road like a blanket. My headlights barely cut through it. That's when my car started acting weird. First the lights flickered. Just once. Then again. Then the radio. Static. Then something worse. I heard voices. Not music. Not talking. Voices. But they were backwards. Like someone had reversed a recording. Low. Whispering. Wrong. I reached to turn the radio off. And that's when I saw it. Something massive crossed the road. Too tall to be a deer. Too wide to be a man. It moved on two legs. My brain froze. I slammed the brakes and skidded to a stop, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The thing disappeared into the fog on the other side of the road. I sat there shaking. The radio went silent. My headlights stopped flickering. My car ran perfectly fine, like nothing happened. I didn't stay there. I turned around and took the longest route home. I never drove that road again at night. But that wasn't the worst part. That summer I had moved into my first apartment. Raintree Village in Abington. Basic one-bedroom, second floor. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I worked nights, so I usually came home around 3 a.m. The complex backed up to woods. During the day, harmless. Kids played there. Joggers passed by. But at night, those woods felt heavy, like the darkness had weight. Some nights, all the sounds would suddenly stop. No owls, no bugs, no wind, just silence. And in that silence, I always felt watched. Then the dreams started, or whatever they were. The first time it happened, I woke up and found myself floating out my bedroom window. Not walking, floating. My body moved without me controlling it. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. My arms felt like concrete. That's when I saw them. Small pale creatures. For maybe 5. They were child-sized but wrong. Too thin. Spindly arms and legs. Big heads. Huge black eyes like polished stones. They moved together. Perfectly synchronized. Gliding instead of walking. I tried to fight. I couldn't move. The air hummed. A low vibration I could feel inside my chest. Then everything went black. I woke up in my bed. Morning sunlight. Heart racing. I told myself it was a nightmare. But that summer kept happening. Not every night. Sometimes a week would pass. Then it happened 3 nights in a row. I'd wake up exhausted. Bruises on my arms. Dirt under my fingernails. Even though I showered before bed. My dreams became clearer. Too clear. I remembered being taken into the woods. Remembered those things surrounding me. Remembered floating against my will. The worst part? The memories felt real. Not dreamlike. Not blurry. Sharp. I moved out that winter. The visits stopped. Years later, I drove past that complex once. It looked the same. The woods were still there. Dark. Thick. Watching. I didn't stop. Some places don't want to be remembered, and some secrets are better left alone. 3 winter nights. A hole that appeared and vanished. A stranger who hunted a child through the woods. A creature that walked out of the fog. Winter doesn't just freeze the ground. It freezes sound. Freezes light. Freezes help. And when everything goes quiet, that's when you realize you were never alone.